Hey, this is George Lynch, in case you didn't know that already, and welcome to my Wicked Riffs video. And we've designed this video to give you insights into my personal approach to various rhythmic techniques, and we'll also be exploring pathways to enhance your compositional skills, hopefully, and songwriting. And I'll be explaining and showing you different facets of my style, including right-hand technique, modulating in and out of major and minor keys, layering and superimposing rhythmic parts over song parts that we'll create together, you and I. So later on we'll be doing some tone questing as well, checking out different pedal combinations, amp configurations, and settings to try and help you achieve tone nirvana, because we all know that great tone leads to wicked riffs. So let's get started. Okay, here's a song you should be familiar with, Mr. Scary. So let me break that down for you now. I'm just going to play through it and go back and discuss it. Okay, so here we go. The first riff was the opening riff. Very simple. This is an F sharp. The chord I would play over that is the F sharp with the open E and the open B, which can also be played up here, the ninth position. A really kind of strange underlying. You can also create the inversion under there with your thumb. So again, the riff is. And right there, we've got this little thematic thing that we do with the bar. And again, if you want to put your thumb underneath there, it gives it kind of a 7-string feel. So you get this cool undertone. It's got a little talking part. The next section, a little more detailed, goes into. And there's the trills in there is what's tricky, and you use the pinky, and that's sometimes difficult to learn how to do. So. Again, that's all palm muted to really get that chunky sound. The next thing is the verse section. One guitar will just hold down the F sharp. Splash F sharp chord. What the other guitar will do is, actually there's a couple of harmonies on top of this, but the most fundamental one is just the flatted fifth. So we got the, and then back to pedaling. So. Then it progresses, it drops down to E. And that's the way it sort of finishes it off. It does that little descending thing off the flatted fifth. Partial chords. Blackmore-ish sort of thing there. Okay, then it modulates up to A flat. Again, it's just very simple chugging underneath. And that's just chromatic. A flat, A sharp, B, back to your F sharp again, into the verse. The pre-chorus, again, very simple. E. Then down a whole step to D, do the same thing. Then accent note on the E, actually a partial, so it's your E and B. Or you can even slide it up and down. And then back to your F sharp. And then we've got a turnaround, B and D sharp. Or D flat, I'm sorry. This is the first breakdown in the song after the first chorus. Guitar all by itself. We've got a break here. This is just a shape, the G, B, D shape, okay? First, second, and pinky. We just take that shape and it reoccurs with a different root. So G, D, A, E, F sharp. So. At that point, we do double stops. The chords under it are D flat, B, A, A flat, and F sharps. And I put this usually on top of it live. I go. Again, double stop, so. And you're back to the verse again. The next section of the song that we'd want to talk about is the solo section, which modulates to A flat. It's played quietly, so it's pretty much muted, volume down. And we got into the solo with an F sharp, B, and then D flat. The solo is in D flat. I'll show you the solo progression is D flat, E, D flat, E flat, or A flat, I'm sorry, B, A flat, back to D flat again. And then this time E, A flat, and then ascend A, B, D flat. And that's the pattern, so it goes like that's pretty much all the elements of the song. All right, and here's a song from the Souls of We album called Crawling. Now this is a slow tempo, very simple, heavy riff, kind of in the Black Sabbath vein. We have a number of layers that we superimpose on top of that riff in different portions of the song. One of those being the most basic thing in the song, which is the baritone riff, which is just a half-step drop. So it's very, very simple. In addition to that, we have a single note line that's a tritone that we superimpose on top of that heavy rhythm. Then halfway through the intro, we have a double stop thing that we'll be demonstrating, and then as the verse starts, we have an arpeggiated part that we use. That's a finger-picking part. So here we go. All right, now we're going to tear the song apart, crawling. And we're going to start with the most basic part of the song, which is the heavy rhythms that underlie the whole song. And it's very, very simple, D to D flat. Now, I originally did this song with a baritone, so it's in an open E, but in a traditional A440 tuning, this is the position we'd be playing in. So, very simply, this is the first rhythm part of the song. It's just a half step down from D to D flat. And then a turnaround is a single note F. And you kind of pinch the harmonic. You rotate around. The first F is on the A string, 8th fret, and the second one is down on the E string on the 1st fret. So once again, it's... And you want to give it a lot of English, and the way I play a lot of my chords is I put a lot of kind of jizz into it. So it's, you're not only palm muting, but you're also muting with your fingers as well and getting a little bit of vibrato out of the string. So it's, I'm getting that shaking on the A and D string with my first finger and my pinky finger. So it gives it kind of a more of a character than just playing a straight bar chord. All right, now the second layer I would add to that, which I did add in the studio, is the single note part, which is very similar to the chords, except you're playing single note on the A string and the E string. And that adds kind of a wiry thinness to the chord, which, if you play it very tightly with the chord, it's a very cool effect. The third layer, by the way, all these layers kind of come in and out. They're not all played simultaneously. But the third layer is an octave layer. It's the octave in D. And that sort of follows the rhythm chords as well, but I'm accentuating the octaves with the bar, and I'm sort of sustaining and vibratoing it just very slightly. So it's giving it that little tail on the end there. And you can also do that with your fingers as well. Your left hand. So there's two ways to do that. The next section would be the double stops that come in the verse. And classic page double stops, very simple, and also just a half step down. So we start with, in the D position, the B string and the G string at the 10th and 12th fret. It's kind of a signature little lick that reoccurs. It's very thematic. It's kind of a little hook. I believe in writing guitar hooks. In addition to vocal hooks. I think more hooks the better. It's a very simple hooky part that people can remember, and it comes along on the intro every single time. So that's the double stops, which the note on the B string is stationary, and the note that you're bending up on the G string is, you're bending it a whole step. So, and then bringing it back down a half step. So. And that takes a bit of control and kind of knowing what the tension in the string does. You can feel a half step bend after a while without even hearing it. I mean, you would know what that should sound like just by being so familiar with the neck and the tension on the string that you know how much you have to come down for a half step. And sometimes there's even a kind of a split between a half step and a quarter step almost. That's where you sort of get into these subtle bluesy nuances that you really kind of create your own vocabulary when you're playing these kind of single note lines. So there's almost a sort of a gray area between these little micro steps that you need to explore. Okay, once the song gets into the verse, The last layer that goes on is the arpeggio part, and that is essentially a chord, partial chord, that stays pretty static, except the only thing that changes is on the B string at the 10th fret, you just drop it down to the 9th fret. So, and it's all played with upstrokes, so it's it's all muted. That's very important. It's all palm muted. So you're laying the palm of your hand close to the bridge, opening up and closing it as much as you feel you need to. And you need to experiment with that, because palm muting is very, very important. I mean, as far as chunking and just sort of defining parts, especially arpeggiated parts. Otherwise, it's all going to ring out and it's not going to sound good. So again, the arpeggiated part is... The next section it gets into is the chorus, and I can play the basic chords of that, and it's a timing thing, and you want to be ahead of the beat and jump on most of these chord changes. So another thing I do sometimes to make it sound a little bit heavier is wrap my thumb around the E string, and I get that sort of inversion by grabbing that note with my thumb. So it's D, C, G chord, and D sharp, just repeated 4 times for the chorus. So it's sort of... And that last chord is just it's a G chord, but I'm just adding the G sharp in there to kind of give it that little ascension before it breaks into the next section, which is the breakdown, reintroduction before the next verse. And that's played on the open D string, and the melody is played right above it on the G string. So it's... So there's the droning on the D, and then there's the little melody part. So it's a question and answer thing, really. So the question is, the answer is, question, question, and then last question. And I've sort of harmonized with myself there, and basically just play the parallel notes on the B string off the fundamental notes. So okay, so here we are at the top of the solo section. The song is modulated. We are now playing the B position, and we've got a nice heavy kind of 70s riff, which is pretty cool, and I'll show it to you right now. Very pentatonic, very simple. There's 2 layers on top of that I'll show you. One of those is halfway through the solo section. It's just a very simple partial bar chord, which is... But you got to slide into it, and you got to add a little bit of vibrato to it. So it's B, back to A, back to B. You notice when it goes up to the D, you kind of just raise it up a little bit. It's just a micro bit, but it's just to create some tension. So it's... Notice when I got that little chunk in there too, that's the palm muting. Gotta get that in there. And the third thing I would do over that, and this is not on the record, but I was just kind of tooling around with it right now, and it's sort of a finger picking thing that I thought sounded really nice over it. So. And that's where I just palm the pick, throw it away, and I'm using my thumb for the bass note on the F sharp on the D string, and I'm leaving those nice open E and B strings just ringing out. I'm picking the melody with my second finger, basically. I'm not really using my index finger at all. So again, I'll just show you it's just 3 different positions, the same exact shape. And the shape is, it's kind of the Dancing Days half step flatted fifth thing. And drop that down, same position, a whole step position down, same shape. Step and a half up to the D position. Okay, so just to wrap up, what we did was we built the song from the ground up. So we had the basic chords, very simple, and we made it interesting, and we made it hooky. We went through the intro, we went through the verse, we went through the chorus, we went through the tag, and the solo section, and a double chorus out. And you take all those elements, you put them together, and hopefully you've built a memorable, hooky, interesting, powerful song. All right, this next song is called Everything I Want. This is off the Souls of We record as well. We're going to instrumentalize this. I'm going to play along with the whole track. I'm going to embellish it a little bit, but this song basically has 4 major components. It has the intro, it has the verse, it has a pre-chorus, and it has a chorus. And it's a very simple song, sort of in the vein of most of the 80s Dawkins songs. It's very structured, it's got a very simple formula to it. So we'll go back and break it down, but let me play along with it first to show you what it looks like. Okay, the first section that we get into with Everything I Want is the intro. Very simple, E minor to A sharp. Repeat that 4 times, and then we do a transition into the verse, which is a chromatic transition from D to B. So D, D flat, C, and B, single note. So I'll play that for you. The one defining thing about the way you play these chords is you've got that open G that sort of repeats itself in cadence with the song, and that's very important. So it goes like this. And that last E minor chord, I was doing sort of a fan picking thing, which is. It's a classical technique that I don't do very well, that obviously it sounds like rotation. So you're starting with your pinky down to your index and back again. And when you do it smoothly and quickly, it sounds very nice. So you let that E minor ring out. And then I switch to my neck position pickup, bring the volume down, and get more dynamic here. And then we've got this first part here, which is, again, emphasizing on that open G, but it's played in E minor. So you've got this shape first, which is your E minor shape with the open G. Second chord is the G and the B, again with the open G. Slide that same shape up to A. And then you've got the little trill at the end. And then back to E again. And some of the nice inflections in there are the sliding that you do here. That's kind of important. And the palm muting as well is very important. So you really want to mute that to bring out the dynamics of that part. So it's a lot of tension right there. The next section we go to is the pre-chorus. You're going to switch pickups to the bridge position, ideally. And it's a kind of a real splashy, chimey part. And the first chord is the C chord. Emphasis on that G. And then back to E minor. Back to D. Back to C. Back to E minor. And then your passing chords here are F major, G major, with these accents. Slide up to G, and now we're at the chorus. This is a very simple song, by the way, so there aren't really any overdubs. There's not any complex parts on top of it. It's very basic in its structure. So now we're at the chorus, which is E, with that little sus on it. So it's you know, A to E at that point. So then we go to G, and you really let that ring out. It's almost like an AC/DC, just a real slow grind across the string. So it's let every note ring individually. Now we're to D, and then A, and then another little hooky bit that's very simple, but it's very memorable, is this little part at the end of each chorus pattern, so, which is, you know, understated and simple, but effective. So. On the second rotation, you don't play the A chord, you play the sus off the D, so it's the D flat off the D. So, and
And then in those little hook parts, there's a kind of a question and answer to it. So the first time you play it, it's, and the second time you played it, it's, which is kind of an answer. So a lot of times when you play things in 2s and 4s, you play a question and an answer, so you get a resolve to it. And it makes it kind of neat and wraps it up in a neat little package. Then we're coming back around to the intro to the song again. So that's basically all the elements of Everything I Want. Same verse part for the chorus, or for the solo, underneath the solo. And the pre-chorus, you solo over the pre-chorus as well. And then it goes into a double chorus out. And that is the most simple formula for a song, for a rock song. And you call those A, B, and C parts. So you've got A, B, C, solo, and then a double chorus out and a song.
In my opinion, riffs are the heart and soul of rock and roll songwriting. Now I'll give you 5 examples of riffs in a variety of tempos, keys, and flavors. Okay, this first riff is a slow driving groove in F sharp. The key to that lick is keeping not only the pedaling going on the F sharp, but pulling back on that open E and B string. You've got this F sharp shape here, but the open B and E is the key to the counterpoint. There's a slide up on the A to the B and back down again. And then you've got this little double stop here. B to C and back to B. So again, it's Here's riff number 2. Breaking that down, what that is, it's a pedal tone in A minor. And we add to that a minor descending pentatonic melody. So you have the flat 5th, and then we have the 4th. Repeat that. That's E to C with the open G, and back to the flatted 5th. The 4ths, we're going to cap this riff off with a turnaround. It goes like this. Back to the A, and that's it. Okay, this is riff number 3. What that is, it's a diminished riff. Symmetrical, reoccurring, diminished shape. The shape is, it just means it's moving in minor thirds, up a step and a half each time. So. Now we got the turnaround, which is 1.5 steps apart. Here's riff number 4. It's a pentatonic box with added chromatics. Let's break this down. The main body of the riff, like I said earlier, is a box, pentatonic box, minor key, with some added chromatic notes. With that slide on top, G to A, back to G. The turnaround on this lick is an interval counterpoint stretch turnaround, for lack of a better term. What that means is we've got a descending note and an ascending note on another string on the D string. So we're on the A and the D string. So here's how the counterpoint works. It's quite a stretch. Good luck with that. Here's riff number 5. This is a shuffle in A. I like to call this BB bottoms. You figure it out. And here it goes. So number 5 is a shuffle in A, very Billy Gibbons-ish, and wherever he got it from. A lot of chicken picking. You're plucking with your first and second and your thumb. Sort of a hot for teacher thing. You've got a lot of partials in there and double stops. And there's a lot of ways you can interpret it. You can sort of embellish it any way you want. I was throwing in the kind of classic blues turnaround. And one of these chords as well. So it's that trill, that's what makes that riff happen, that pull off. And the open G as well. And then bounce right off that with the double stop. And then we've got this little turnaround here in G. And that's basically the elements. Our goal is to play a variety of riffs in different tempos and different key centers. Developing a sense of time and groove is an essential element to get your point across convincingly. Now you can develop this by using a click track, you can use a drum groove, or simply do what the old blues guys did back in the day while sitting on the porch. Just tap your foot. We will expand on this in our next section called Improvisational Techniques. Improvisation is a big part of what I do. Ad-libs and inflections give lots of flavor to music, and if contrived will sound stiff. So I've developed some tricks and examples to practice so that when an occasion for improvisation arises, you can be ready. This first example is a jam in A minor called Sirocco. I basically use a low A pedal and superimpose chords over the groove. You can use any voicings, and you will see how adding trills and single note phrases in between will add the flavor. we want to talk about what we were doing there, we started off with very simple fifths in A. We developed from there. So let me talk first about the beginning riff, which is just. And again, that's just a fifth shape, dropping down a whole step. Now I'm putting all kinds of little inflections in there, little trills up to the sixth. And when I drop down the whole step, one thing you could do is drop it down to a major feel by just going to that note. So, and I was doing a little turnaround, the F and the G. Or you can play it up here. And over that, I played sort of what we called Lynch Montgomery, which is just where it's just an octave. Okay, you're just playing octaves and you're comping them, right? All with the, you know, use your picking hand, you're just plucking. After that, we started moving into more of a blues mode, minor blues pattern, and I played these sort of arpeggiated double stops, again with no pick, just finger picking. And then I moved beyond that into the next phase, which is these double stops, but they're intervallic. And we started to create a melody. So this melody sort of made this, the improvisation move somewhere where you have some sort of a hook. So, and then we modulated to D right there. So that was the progression. So. And then we added a turnaround right there, which is F and E. And back to the A. At that point, I started playing the A and the F using some alternative chords. So the A ninth with added 13th. And that's how I use comping, partials, intervallic, double stops, and finger picking to sort of improvise in not a pure lead sense, but just using chording. And what I like about that is you're actually developing melodies, hooks, riffs that you can, which later, for me, turn into songs. This is how I develop ideas for songs. I find something in these little jams that are hooks to me. For instance, which is a nice little refrain. And who knows, that may turn into something. So good luck with that. One huge overlooked element to the basis of rock music, I believe, is, for some people, especially younger kids, is the blues element. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in a time where the infancy of British rock, where the blues influence was very apparent. So, you know, the Muddy Waters and the Albert King and all these guys' influence, Robert Johnson's influence was there when you listen to Cream and Led Zeppelin and Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds and, you know, a multitude of other bands. They were basically just taking and transforming blues music. And they owe a huge debt. Rolling Stones, ZZ Top, owe a huge debt to these founders of what became rock and roll. And so I think you'd be doing yourself a great disservice not to go back and familiarize yourself with this music and hopefully incorporate it into essentially what you are in your playing style. And it's a very good base to start from, and if you can add exotic and technical elements to that, you can come up with a hybrid personal style and have a unique voice. hopefully all your own. And that's what I've felt I've tried to do over the years. So I'm just going to jam along with just a blues progression for a while with my 59 Esquire here, and give you an idea of what I'm talking about, with a little foot stomping help from the peanut gallery.
A lot of what I'm doing here is chord soloing, just mixing it up, taking a lot of different elements, and we'll talk about some of those elements. And these are things that are great to use when you're improvising and coming up with new song ideas. It basically is composed of a lot of partials, 2 strings at a time, little tiny chords, you know. And in addition to that, when you start doing these partials, find a bass note to bounce it off of. So if I'm doing a partial here in C and I throw this G flat in here, or even this C sharp, you can get kind of strange new shapes that sound very interesting. Another thing I use is sort of, the octave West Montgomery jazzy thing. And a lot of this I do with, without the pick, just picking with my thumb and plucking with my first two fingers. Also using intervallic shapes, this is kind of a bluesy shape that I use a lot, skipping the B string. So. And sometimes tapping on the neck, sometimes an octave above the string, sometimes just it's more random than that. So. And it's really the idea of putting all these things together and using them to kind of create a pastel, a picture of create some depth. And so it's a really dynamic style. And if you incorporate this with straight rock soloing, I think you really add depth to your playing. I think that's the point. In this final example of chord soloing, I'm going to show you how we use chords to create melodies. I want to thank you for joining me in exploring the rhythmic possibilities I presented. And I hope you've understood the importance of rhythm playing. The role of rhythm playing is an often overlooked aspect of a guitarist's arsenal. Rhythm is 80% of music. Rhythm is the vehicle that creates the foundation of what we sing over and what we solo over. In the final analysis, the musical idea that we are trying to convey should not be limited to simply soloing. Rhythm is the linchpin of musical structure. So I want you to get out there and bring wicked riffs to your musical explorations.
Okay, I want to talk about right hand technique for a little bit. I use two basic approaches to right hand technique, and one is obviously pick between index and thumb, and I have sort of an unorthodox picking style. I hold the pick faced back towards the bridge, and I pick with the side of the plectrum, and I usually attack the string first with my index fingernail, and sometimes follow it up to get pinch harmonics with the thumb, just the fleshy part of the thumb. And this is sort of an unconscious thing that I've done all my life, and you know, I've learned that now I do this and I explain it to people. It's very unnatural for me to hold the pick straight up and down like that. But there's disadvantages to holding a pick like that. If it doesn't come natural to you, it's much harder to play fast because you don't have that, you know, the tip of the plectrum facing down. So I'm just letting you know how I hold it. But in the last 10 years or so, I've started, you know, following the way of Beck and palming the pick between my first and second finger, and using a lot of finger picking stuff. I only use my first two fingers. I didn't use my third finger. But I'll show you an example. It's very, very simple. It's nothing difficult, but. Another thing I do is tap on the neck itself with my thumb, and this isn't done in any specific place. It's more of a percussive thing, so it's semi-random in a sense. So let's say I have like an F inversion like this, and back to E and to C. I would play it by an alternative to tapping that would be. And as I said, it's just very percussive, different than hitting, you know, the octave, tapping the octave above, or plucking the octave above, which is something else I'll show you in a later video. But this is one of those things when you're playing along in a song and you throw something like this in, it just adds such dynamics, and it just changes things up. It grabs people's attention and gives it a completely different sound, whether you're clean or distorted. It works, you know, either way. My picking style is I use a lot of palm muting, you know, in the kind of Billy Gibbons vein of rhythm styles, and that creates the potential for a lot of dynamics. You can open things up and mute things down and get real chunky, obviously when you add a lot of thick distortion. So I'll turn it up and I'll play the same thing I played with the finger picking example, and that was A minor, and I'll play that distorted with the pick and show you how that works. I'm going to show you how I incorporate the tremolo bar into my rhythm playing. And there's a couple different techniques that I use. One is I use the bar in place of the pick. I don't even hit the chord. I just descend with the bar and bring the chord back up. So you got an ascending into the note. Another thing you can do is you can sort of tap the tempo, or double the tempo, or half the tempo with the bar as well. Kind of accentuate the tempo of the song. Another technique I use with the bar is to what I call float the notes and create a little tension, sustain on the string, and give it a little vibrato, as opposed to picking the notes. Here's another tremolo bar technique that I use to create sort of an exotic feel to chords by pulling back on the bar, either pulling back or pushing down on the bar if you got it turned around towards, facing towards the back of the guitar. When I first started out playing at 10 years old, my dad introduced me to flamenco music, which I wasn't very good at, but it was my very first influence, and the first song I learned was Malagueña, and I did actually pick up some technique that I continue to use to this day, and one of those things was this flamenco-style right-hand fan picking, for lack of a better term. I'm not sure what it's actually really called, but the heart of my playing and my inspiration is my tone. I've always had this imaginary tone in my head that I've sort of been, searching for and being drawn towards. And so my gear is very, very important to me. It's sort of a feedback loop that I feel that if I'm hearing it in my head the way I want to hear it, I'm able to play what it is I want to play. So bad tone is my enemy. And what I want to talk about is amps, guitars, and pedals. The three elements, major elements that comprise, the tools that we use to achieve the tone that we need. The most basic pedal that I use right now, that I'm using tonight to get my tone, is the Zoom Mr. Scary Signature Edition G2G pedal. It's a digital pedal. And what I did was I went into the studio, into my studio with an engineer, and we captured, an incredible array of sounds using, old Marshalls, the Lynch boxes, old Tweeds and AC30s, variety of guitars, and old analog pedals to capture all these incredibly vintage and modern sounds and burn those all into a chip. And that's what this is. So, instead of having $300,000 worth of equipment, it's kind of all in the box, so to speak. So I wish they had things like this when I was a kid. So I depend on this a lot, especially in the studio. The second pedal I want to show you is this Deja Vibe, which is a very old full-tone piece. This is one of his early prototypes. And this is the rotary speaker emulation, very Hendrixy, Trowerish. This is a great version of this, by the way. The newer ones don't sound as warm and as rich. And so this kind of gives a very sweeping, swirly kind of effect that is really cool when you have backed off kind of guitar tone. And use this with a wah-wah pedal or an octave pedal and a little bit of delay. And this is a real interesting thing to use economically and selectively. I wouldn't use it too much, but it's one of those pedals where you can step on it here and there just to get a certain kind of inflection or flavor in something that you're doing. Next up, this is another holy grail piece, a vintage MXR Phase 90. These are very expensive if you can find them. Eddie, used these a lot early on and still does. But they are fantastic, very warm, and they're great for when you're doing really quick lines, really fast legato type stuff, and it just kind of smooths out all the edges, and it gives this really great, 180, or well, actually a 90 sweep. I prefer this to the 180, but again, you got to get the old one. The new ones sound pretty good, but the old ones are definitely the one to get. This is also another classic, the TS-808 Tube Screamer. These are also quite rare and desirable. Stevie Ray Vaughan made them famous. Eric Johnson, a lot of people have used them. New ones sound pretty good too, but the original ones, you can spend a lot of money on, but and a lot of people are trying to copy them. And some of them do a pretty good job, including this company, which is the Cusack Screamer, not Tube Screamer, the Cusack Screamer, which has a little less of that mid-range bump. So it's a little less extreme in the mids, but that's kind of where the guitar lives, is in the mid-range. So I find I use this better, prefer this for solos and this for chords. Gives it kind of a chunkier, metalier sound, and this is a little sweeter for soloing. Another overdrive that I like is the DoD 250, and this is also a vintage pedal. This is Yngwie's secret weapon. He's got one of these back there cranked all the time, everything to 12 or 11, whatever. And this is really a solo piece. I don't like this for rhythms. I think it thins it out too much. You lose a lot of your body in your low end. But if you just want to tear it up and play fast, this really helps. It really does. But again, it does take some of the body away. So if you're more a bluesy player, you probably wouldn't like it as much. But for a shreddy player, it really helps quite a bit. And one last overdrive pedal I'd like to talk about, which I'm using currently, is the T-Rex Michelangelo pedal, which is a good all-around unit. It kind of does everything, and it doesn't push too hard. It just pushes the front end of the amps just enough to give it that little extra something without taking away the low end, which a lot of pedals tend to do, overdrive pedals. So I like this one a lot. And the last pedal I'd like to bring up is the new Morley Dragon Wah, which is something I've been working with Morley on for about a year now. And what's different about this pedal is we've designed a notch, a user assignable notch in the back where you set a dip switch to a certain location in the wah position. And by hitting a switch, you can always access that position. So what you accomplish by that is you can get that sort of Schenker, half-cocked wah sound without having to search for that sweet spot. It's always right there. You hit the button and it goes right there automatically. And I thought that was a neat feature. So that's my pedal array. I also use delay, obviously. I usually default to the Boss delay, DD5, DD6, whatever I can find. But what I actually do prefer is old Echoplexes, and I do have a tube Echoplex as well as solid state. Unfortunately, they're very noisy and they break down all the time, as we know. But when they work, they're the best sounding delay, I believe, because they have a certain amount of grit to them and distortion, and a loss on the high end. So it just kind of adds a neat little nastiness to the note. But a lot of maintenance. So there you go. That was my pedals. In case you don't know, I've been playing ESP guitars for up to 23 years now, and I've developed over a dozen models in those years. I'm involved with the design from the inception to bringing it all to the table, designing the neck shape, the body, the type of wood, the pickup, the radius, the frets, on and on and on, the controls, and etc. It's been very gratifying for me. I took design in school and drafting, industrial design, and I do some of that at home and work with the designers with the CAD systems and so forth, work in the wood shops and test the woods and the electronics and all those sorts of things. So I'm very deeply involved, and because it's very important to me, and I feel when you're playing a guitar that you've actually had your hands involved in, you care a lot more about it because you're more invested in it. So the guitars that I have that I use with ESP mean a lot to me. There's a lot of history there, and I've got a lot of my personal blood, sweat, and tears invested in these things. And it's an evolving sort of experiment, because the guitars that I designed and played in the 80s are not necessarily the guitars that I would play now. So just like the music changes over the years, so do our taste in instrumentation. And I think the guitars that I'm designing with ESP are a reflection of that. I think the single most important element in your gear chain is the amplifier. You can take a reasonably good sounding guitar or an average sounding guitar, and if you got a great amp, you're going to be okay. I don't think the converse is true. So I've spent a lot of time and dedicated a lot of R&D into questing, finding that amp. And with Randall, we've come up with the LYNCH box. It's a modular amp, which gives you a lot of flexibility. It's got a great power section. It's got a great transformer that we built from the ground up. It's got great tubes, and the preamps themselves transform the sound to a great degree. I mean, you're limited to a certain respect with the power section, but you can change up the tubes and achieve actually a different character in the power section itself. The other thing I did with the LYNCH box is I developed my own speaker, which is modeled after the early 70s Fane 50 watt Nico-Ferrite speakers, which I think are very unique sounding. They're somewhere in between a Celestion and maybe a very early JBL. They have a little more clarity and don't break up quite as much as the Celestions, but they do break up, and they have a nice warmth, but also a little bell-like kind of ping on top too that is nice. So it's a good balance, I think. And that's the Eminent Super V speaker that's loaded into the LYNCH box cabinets. The 15-ply birch. We didn't put wheels on them. We didn't put handles on them. The rear-mounted speakers, which sounds best, and the baffle board is very thin. And I've learned a lot in talking to amp people and designers and engineers about amplifiers and speakers and speaker cabinets over the years. I've used to build my own cabinets, and I've applied some of these things I've learned from people that know a lot more than I do, and we invested all these ideas into the LYNCH box amp. So if you get a chance, check it out. But there are a lot of other great amps, obviously, in the world, and we all have to search out for what works for us. I plug into somebody else's rig, and I'm still going to sound like me. What works for me may not work for you, and so forth. So I hope that you're successful in finding that combination of guitar, pickup, amplifier, and effects that helps you achieve your personal style and your personal voice, because that's more important than sounding like anybody else. The most important thing is you sound like you. So good luck.